Hey everyone, thank you for joining today. My name is Pian Pian. I'm the founder and CEO of Amotions. Amotions is a platform to help you increase success and happiness by developing important skills such as emotional intelligence, interpersonal skills, and leadership skills. We have a platform for you to connect with experts, researchers, coaches, and peers to practice and learn from each other, and also to access our mobile app and AI insights and exercises. Today, we're very happy to have Dr. David Caruso with us. Dr. David Caruso is a psychologist that's an expert in the emotional intelligence field. He has co-authored multiple books, for example, The Emotional Intelligence Manager with Peter Salovey, current Yale president, and he has also co-authored the MSCI test, which is the emotional intelligence test with Peter Salovey and also John Mayer. And Dr. Caruso also has worked in the industry in different fields, for example, in product management and market research. And he has coached executives around the world in multiple countries. We are very happy to have you here, Dr. David Caruso. Please, if you would like to add anything about yourself, please feel free to add.
Thank you, Pian Pian, and thanks for inviting me here. I probably won't add anything now, but maybe as we go through the hour together.
Okay, great, wonderful. Okay, yeah. So Dr. Caruso is going to share screen and go through the workshop today with us. This is the part one of a series of workshop on emotional intelligence, and we look forward to it.
And so this is an overview in 1 hour. We'll try to summarize probably the last 30 years of work in this area, 30 years of research, and just realized 25 years of practice in terms of application. So I'm excited to do this, and hopefully one or more aspects of this session will be of value to you. So it's not just to learn more, but it's also to do things differently. So I hope that when you leave here, you see things a little differently, but you might do things a little differently as well. So with that, any kind of session like this, the content should be shared, right? We want you to apply this. But when we're in a large group, we don't want personal information to be shared. Just a note about that. So what is emotional intelligence? You'll see this repeated a couple of times. We sometimes call it the ability model of emotional intelligence. Sometimes we call these hard skills. And over the 30 years of doing this work, the terms sometimes have changed a little bit, but in the last few years, I've kind of settled on these 4 labels for these 4 hard skills. We say map your emotions. So accurately perceive how you're feeling and how others are feeling using what we call a mood map. That's why we have map. Well, once you know how you're feeling and others are feeling, we want you to match those feelings and to connect with that individual. That's what emotional empathy is about. But something really cool, I think, about the model is we also want you to match the emotions to the task or task to emotions to get things done. So I'm mapping how we feel, we're matching it, we're making the connection. Then we try to understand the meaning, like what is going on here? What's causing us to feel this way? How might these feelings change? And then finally, in real time, you're constantly moving how you feel and other people feel to achieve that outcome. If this sounds and looks pretty simple, it is very simple, and it looks kind of simplistic. But the challenge, and I'll repeat this at the end, is can you do this at a really high level of skill on a consistent basis in real time while under stressful conditions? And I have yet to meet someone who can do all those things. I do, I smile to myself when I get introduced as an expert. I've studied it, but man, this stuff is really hard to do. And as all of you know, so do beware the experts out there. You want to, we all want to learn from one another as well, and also learn when we don't get it right. So a little humility, I think, helps us an enormous amount. So with that, where does this stuff come from? I'll give you just a really brief background. Charles Darwin, you know his work, but you may not know this book. He studied non-humans, and what this chart shows is that not only can we detect emotions in other people, whether they're from our culture or a different culture, but we can detect emotions across species. And emotions are data. I love saying that. Emotions are information. So if you are walking around later or tomorrow and you come across the animal in the top middle with the red rectangle, your ability to read that signal can save your life. This animal is signaling aggression. So you run away, you move away, you don't make eye contact, you turn the corner, you're just breathing really heavily, catching your breath, and you come across the dog in the lower right. What is that dog signaling to you? And if you know about dogs, we have 4 large dogs at home. So this is submission, or in dog language, it's called a play bow. This is not a threat. This animal is not a threat. So emotions are data and they send signals. It's kind of a different way of looking at emotions. And here's another way to look at emotions. This is really counterintuitive. It's the work of Antonio Damasio. And he says emotions can help you think. I like this quote so much that even though you can see it, I want to read it to you. Far from interfering with rationality, the absence of emotion and feeling can break down rationality and make wise decision-making almost impossible. So if you take that in for just a moment, what Damasio is saying, is a great researcher, writes really well, that emotions can help you think. Emotions can help you make really good decisions. And yet, like we're trained to think just the opposite. And many of us will say, I shouldn't be so emotional, let's take emotion out of it. It's not really good advice. But we'll see how we get confused later on today. So with that, with all this in the way of the background, this is how 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, 2 psychologists, they met at some conferences in 1980s and began to talk about, emotions can kind of be helpful, said one. The other said, yeah, I agree. And also you can be really smart about emotions. So they came up with a theory of emotional intelligence. And as Pian mentioned, one is Peter Salovey, now president of Yale. And although it is John D. Mayer, who goes by Jack Mayer, is now a full professor of psychology at University of New Hampshire. So this is the start, and this is what this hour is going to focus on. As you also mentioned, Pian, we have a mesquite. We measure emotional intelligence. We won't spend much time here, but just to make this one point, it's really hard to know what your level of skill is in general, but even harder with emotional intelligence. We know that most people overestimate their emotional intelligence. And think about this as well. So what's the danger? What's the problem if you overestimate your skills here? I may think I'm reading people well, but I don't. And so I move ahead with the conversation with bad data. So with all this, we've got 30 years of research behind us. And that's not the purpose of today, but I did want to give you a grounding. I wanted to show you what we're basing these things on. It's pretty good. These are all peer-reviewed. Yeah, I think these are all peer-reviewed articles as well. Just so you know, my name pops up there a little over 20 years ago. I met Jack Mayer the first day of graduate school at Case Western Reserve University in Ohio. This was 40 years ago. And then in the 1980s, I went to Yale University in the psych department to be what's called a postdoctoral fellow. And I met a young, still graduate student named Pete Salovey. Jack and Peter met separately, but we've been colleagues and friends for a long time. So it's kind of interesting, those of you who are scientists or thinking of going into research, like how does research work? A lot of it is about colleagues and about relationships. And I'm really happy with these. So with that, what we also find is when we measure people's emotional intelligence, so like what's it good for? And these are just some of those things. The higher one scores, the more they engage in pro-social helpful behavior. They have greater stress tolerance. They're more empathic, and they're better at handling conflict. And again, this is a summary of about 30 years of research on the topic. So it's not the single most important thing, absolutely not. But these are the outcomes associated with higher levels of emotional intelligence. So with that, let's move into applying this work. Think about how many times a day someone asks you, hey, how you doing? And your reply is usually,